I think this is a very interesting topic today. We're going to find in the Kuzari. We're on page 232. Our topic today is the wisdom of the sages, the great wisdom that our sages must have had in order to be able to exposit on so many different topics that we find in Torah She'ba'al Peh, in our oral tradition. That was really the whole context of this discussion, because remember, part of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's project is to bolster and defend the prestige of rabbinic Judaism. He lives at a time where Judaism is looked upon as perhaps something primitive in comparison to the more sophisticated philosophy of its day. And so the Jews are viewed as a backward people in Andalusia, in the Spanish milieu where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is living. And his project in the Kuzari is to explain that not only is Judaism not backward, but look at the tremendous amount of richness of knowledge that the sages must have possessed in order to be able to explain so many facets of religious practice. Think for just a moment about the knowledge that they must have about anatomy and about zoology in order to be able to know when an animal is a treifa and when an animal is not a treifa, when an animal is kosher or when it's not kosher as a result of the sustaining of an injury, which is a whole discussion in Maseches Chulin, in the tractate Chulin. Imagine how much knowledge they had to know about the human physiology to determine the laws of discharges, Hilchot Nida, which are extant even today, and to know what kind of discharge renders a woman a Nida, what kind of discharge does not render her a Nida, what kind of discharge renders her a Zava, and which does not. So that's really the context of where we come into our conversation. And it brings us to paragraph 7 in page 232, which is another aspect of wisdom that the rabbis must have had, which is the knowledge of astronomy. And we're just going to spend a short amount of time on that because I really want to get more into a discussion of music today, if we can. But he says, in paragraph 7, one of the most amazing aspects of the Jewish calendar is that the basis for all the calculations, the length of a lunar month, has been passed down from the family of King David. This figure has remained the same for hundreds and thousands of years and has never been refuted. On the other hand, the calendars of the Greeks and others have changed from their original calculations. Now, we don't have to go into a history of the calendars of various different cultures throughout history, but one thing that we do know is that the Julian calendar was changed to the Gregorian calendar in 1582. And by the year 1582 of the Common Era, there was a whole bunch of the whole secular calendar, which is based on the solar motions, was in disarray because they used the calendar year of 365 days instead of 365 and 1/4 days. And so over the course of decades and centuries, Christmas ended up in the middle of November. The whole thing was totally messed up. And so they had to make a complete a revamping of the calendar. But when you compare that to the Jewish calendar, which is a 19-year cycle that aligns the solar and lunar motions of the heavenly bodies, you discover that the original calendar that was put into place thousands of years ago has been faithful and has never needed any kind of adjustment. So that's one of the things that is really, very admirable about what we can look proudly upon back in our culture and see there was a lot of wisdom. There's a richness of wisdom within in Jewish education and in the knowledge base of the leaders of the Jewish people, far superior certainly in being able to calculate a calendar system. Certainly we were way ahead. And it has become necessary to adjust the current calendar every 100 years. By contrast, our lunar calculations have remained accurate because they are based on prophecy. If the calculations were inaccurate even slightly, over time a great disparity would arise between the calculated times for the new moon and the actual sightings. But this has not been the case. And just as the sages knew how to calculate the lunar month, they undoubtedly also knew the length of the solar year and the calculation of the stars' orbits. And as I mentioned in the footnote, in footnote 367, there's a certain tremendous amount of accuracy that goes into reconciling the solar year and the lunar year, because the lunar year is 354 days approximately, and the solar year is 365.25 days approximately. And so that's why we end up with leap years, where we add an extra month of Adar, on average about once every 2.5 years, in order to be able to come up with that reconciliation. That's why it's a 19-year cycle that we have. But the accuracy that we have about the length of a lunar month is really, really accurate. It's, if you want to look, if you want to see a fuller discussion, there's an appendix in the back of this book. It's Appendix C, the International Dateline Time Zones in the Jewish Calendar. And in a section over there about the Jewish calendar, let's see. Well, you can look towards the end of that appendix on page 623. It talks a little bit about the molad, but the length of that the rabbis had, the tradition that the rabbis had for the length of a lunar month is 29 days, 12 hours and 44 minutes, and a few seconds. And that has turned out to be almost to the second an accurate calculation to this day. It's off by maybe a fraction of a second. And that fraction of a second does create some slight discrepancy for us, but really does not create a significant discrepancy. The point is that the wisdom that the rabbis possessed is truly remarkable. Now, of course, if a person were a skeptic, a person could say, well, where did the rabbis get this wisdom from? So Rabbi Yehuda Levi says they got this wisdom from prophecy. And this is like HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. God says, I'm giving you this. This calculation is yours. I'm giving you this knowledge. It's not just that I'm giving you the law of Kiddush HaChodesh, of sanctifying the new moon, but I'm also giving you the knowledge to know how to mathematically calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies. I remember when I was having this discussion many years ago with someone who was a bit of a skeptic, he told me that the Babylonians had the same technology, and the Jews could have gotten this from the Babylonians. I don't know. I can't tell you one way or the other. I wasn't there. But it certainly is an impressive argument and certainly demonstrates a superiority of the Jewish calendar over the Christian calendar that was extant during this time. Yes?
Do you think it's a testament to the wisdom of the sages? I always thought it was a testament to the veracity of the Torah.
Well, the Torah itself doesn't say anything explicit about the length of a lunar year.
I always assumed it was given over the Masorah as part of Torah Shabbat Peh.
It was, but in order to be able to appreciate it, the rabbis had to have a working knowledge of astronomy, to know how to make certain calculations. In other words, let's say they were given a Masorah, but they had no mathematical or astronomical knowledge. They wouldn't know what to do with it. So I think you're right. I mean, I think that it is part of the Masorah, but the Masorah can only be utilized properly with a group of leaders who have a working knowledge of both math and astronomy.
It doesn't seem that it's really that difficult, because you're telling me that it's so accurate, but then over there it says that they have every X number of years they have to recalculate it, they have to adjust it, just like they adjust the non-Jewish.
Who has to adjust it?
Didn't it say that?
No, it says that the Gentile, the Greek calendar, has been necessary to adjust every 100 years.
What about the thing you said about the $200?
Yes, that's actually built into the calendar system. It's to allow for the discrepancy between the solar and lunar years. The lunar year is 354 days, the solar year is 365 days. So built into that, yeah. But that's not due to error. That's pre-calculated. Yeah.
And also, this month, it's a short month. There is no second
Rosh Chodesh?
second Rosh Chodesh. There usually is.
Well, right, and that's based on a preset calendar, a night with a 19-year cycle. And sometimes Teshvan will be 29 days, and sometimes it will be 30 days. That's right. Exactly. Okay, so if this subject is of interest to you, there are a number of very good books that I can recommend in English that demonstrate the working system of the lunisolar calendar that works in halacha. The Rambam has an extensive discussion of it in Mishnah Torah, but that's in Hebrew, of course. But there's some really, really good books. One of the books I reference in the appendix that I used, because I don't have this information always at my fingertips, but there's a good book called Understanding the Jewish Calendar, which was published in 1989 by Moznaim Publishers, by Rabbi Nathan Bushwick. And it's a very good book, and it goes through a lot of these discussions about understanding the Jewish calendar. So we'll leave it at that for now. Yes?
What is the reason for 2 days of Rosh Chodesh?
Well, 2 days of Rosh Chodesh is to allow for, whenever there's a 30-day month, then that will indicate that the following month will have 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, one for the 30th day of the previous month and one for the first day of the new month. What I wanted to get into is more the next discussion, because remember, he's talked about anatomy, he's talked about zoology, he's talked about botany and a knowledge of agriculture. He's talked now about the wisdom of math and astronomy that exists within the sages. And then he says, in paragraph 8 on page 233, he says, as far as musical knowledge is concerned, consider for yourself how this nation has venerated its melodies and given the responsibility of its national music to its leaders, the Leviim. The Leviim would engage themselves in these melodies in the distinguished temple at distinguished times. And as we know, this was the role of the Leviim. This is brought down in the Tanakh, in Sefer Divrei Hayamim. It says that the Leviim would play musical instruments during the offering of the Karbanos. And it's brought down in the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah and in the Mishnah in Sukkah. So this is part of our tradition, that the Leviim played music during the offering of certain Karbanos. Why were they playing music during the offering of certain Karbanos? Clearly there's an acknowledgement that music has value, that music is supposed to stir the soul. Music is meant to inspire. Perhaps I'm overstating the obvious. We all know that, right? Then why is it that some people can't wait on a Shabbos morning to finish davening and can't stand any of the singing? Maybe it's because they don't like music. There are plenty of people who don't like music because they don't have, if a person doesn't have a good ear for music, they don't necessarily enjoy music. It's like trying to show art to a blind person. There are people who don't have a good ear for music and they don't appreciate music. But that's a nebuch on that person, right? In other words, that should be the attitude. Nebuch on that person, they don't appreciate good music. Not, okay, let's try to get through davening as quickly as we can because some people don't enjoy music. Music, when done well, when done properly, is supposed to inspire. It's supposed to enhance a religious and spiritual experience. That's why music was being played by the Leviim in the Beis HaMikdash during the Karbanos. Now, of course, this could lead a person to lament the fact, well, then why don't we have music being played in shul on Shabbos? Wouldn't that be an interesting idea, right? Well, actually, this was done at different times in history, but the rabbis at one time banned the playing of musical instruments on Shabbos and Yom Tov because it could lead to the performance of a malacha, to the performance of fixing an instrument. And so the rabbis felt that while choral performances are perfectly fine, but musical performances are not okay on Shabbos and Yom Tov. In the temple, they were done on Shabbos and Yom Tov because this was before the ban. And when the temple is restored, Bezrat Hashem, very soon, that ban will not apply inside the Beit HaMikdash. It only applies outside the temple. I'll tell you something else that may shock you. Not too long ago, we celebrated Simchas Torah. It's documented that many European communities, very, very frum European shuls, used to hire Gentiles to play on Simchas Torah so that they could enjoy the hakafas. This was later banned. I'm not advocating that. I'm not advocating anything. Right? I'm just letting you know that this was a practice at the time, and apparently it drew sufficient criticism for it to be banned. You know, today, even the conservative temple has a problem if a Gentile sings in their choir, right? But it's interesting to note, the irony is that there used to be, even in the most religious, the frummest shul, they used to have non-Jews, because you couldn't ask a Jew to perform, because that could lead to malacha, right? So they would hire non-Jews to perform so that they could enjoy the music on Simchas Torah. Yes.
We have a thing in our, I guess it's a minhag. I don't know if it's a Sephardic thing or just a thing that I grew up with. Like when we had a simcha in our house, we always played music to keep the satan away. Does that sound
To keep the satan away.
Yeah, like, I don't know, is that like a weird thing? Have you ever even heard of it, or just?
I'm not saying it's weird, but I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's just like it's good to have music in the house.
Yeah.
Because it keeps everybody happy and.
Keeping the satan away could just be another way of saying to keep people happy.
Yeah.
Because when people are unhappy, people get depressed. That's when the satan comes into people's lives. Yeah, good. Okay. So he says they were not financially burdened, referring to the Levim. The Levim had no financial responsibilities, and so this allowed them time to compose music, to become virtuosos. They were basically retained by the Jewish government, by the Israeli government, to be full-time musicians and full-time composers. And so they had no pursuits other than music. This was the Levim's full-time occupation. The Levites were glad to engage in music because its pursuit was greatly esteemed by all, for it was not a demeaning or lowly occupation, meaning by contrast to what it is today. Right? You're a musician. You must have patches on your elbows and earn a low income. You know, no one wants to say, my son went to university to study music. My son went to university to become a doctor. He learned to play violin. What are you going to make money off of a violin? In those days, it meant something. It was prestigious. This was a great thing. Those in the nation who were involved with music were of important stock and thoroughly pure. And the forerunners of this devotional music were David and Shmuel. What then do you think? Did they know the sphere of music well or not? Can you only imagine what music must have sounded like back then? Think of the most sophisticated, intricate music you can think of today, and then multiply that by 1 billion to get to the level of beauty and artistic greatness that must have existed in the times of the Levim. And the Kuzari says, undoubtedly, music was very highly developed among them. It inspired them spiritually. People today say that music can drastically alter a person's mood. But it is implausible to think that music today is of the same quality as it was back then. Now, I hear this all the time. I tell this to my kids. I say to my kids, I feel sorry for you that you didn't grow up in the 70s, because the music you guys listen to today, or the 60s, because the music that you listen today is garbage, right? And I'm sure my parents said the same thing to me. The music today that you listen to is garbage, right? You should have been around when, you know,
30s, 40s.
in the 30s and the 40s, when Glenn Miller's band was playing. That was something. That was music, right? And then I'm sure their parents told them, you know, but when we, anyway. So anyways, but he says, the music today it's impossible that it's of the same quality as it was back then. In our time, it has lost its status and has been consigned to servants and scoundrels. The people that compose and play music professionally are not important people. These are not necessarily spiritual people. They're certainly not particularly religious people. And therefore, how can possibly Rabbi Yehuda Halevi associates their ability to produce music to their spiritual caliber? And if the people today are scoundrels, then how can they possibly produce the kind of sublime music that the Levium would have been able to produce? And this last sentence I absolutely love. I'm in love with this last sentence. He says, it has declined in importance just as you have declined in importance. That, what does that line mean? He says that music's importance has declined just as the Jewish people's importance has declined. Now, it's important to consider what he actually means by that. Why is he creating this analogy? Yes?
As the culture declines, the music declines.
Yes, but why is he comparing it to the declining status or the esteem of the Jewish people within society? He's saying music's declined, just like you as the Jewish people have declined. Now, he could mean a number of things. I just want to suggest the possibility of the different things that he means, and with this we'll hold it for today. Well, actually, I didn't go over the handout with you. One of the things he could mean is that just as the world has lost its appreciation for esoteric ideas and art that go beyond the three dimensions of space, and people have lost an appreciation for the finer things in life, the world has also lost an appreciation for the spiritual offerings of the Jewish people. If people really appreciated art and music the way they should, because music, when you think about it, taps into the soul, they would appreciate Judaism. They would appreciate Torah and appreciate what the Jewish people have to offer, because what we offer to the world is really of the same ilk of what music offers to the world. Beauty, refinement, a stirring within the soul. So that's what the Torah does too. So in that sense, they're very much in sync with each other. But I think there may be some other messages that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is trying to communicate in a very, very subliminal way. That it could be a little bit of a criticism at the status of his Judaism of his day, which might be something that we may want to think about, whether our Judaism of today is subject to the same level of criticism. Music has declined because of the people who are playing that music. If you wanted to create an absolute parallel, Judaism has declined because of the people who are leading and playing Judaism. In other words, part of the reason why Judaism has lost its appeal to the world, and perhaps even to some of its adherents, is because just like listening to Eminem gives you a headache, sometimes listening to certain leaders within the Jewish world can give you a headache too. And instead of inspiring, it has the exact opposite effect. Yeah? But that's not real Judaism, just like that's not real music. Yes?
You made the correlation between Judaism and music, that they both stir your soul. I can't help thinking about what I once read about those Nazis that would kill the Jews all day in concentration camps and come home and listen to classical music. It stirred their soul. I don't see that correlation between music and Judaism, because to me, music is instinctual and Judaism is intellectual. And you can have someone who's a beast and who appreciates beautiful music. How do you understand that dissonance because they're two separate things.
Mrs. Sakhachevsky, you're asking an excellent question, but I think the premise is a flawed premise. I think you're mistaken, and it's an excellent point that you're making. I'm not discounting the validity of the question, but I think the application is a misapplication. Judaism is not purely a stirring of the intellect. It's not what it is. If a person only feels that the Torah stirs the intellect, there's so much more to the substance of the soul than the intellect, what we call the intellectual mind. Judaism is supposed to stir something within me that connects all of the different parts of my psyche, including my emotions, including other parts that we don't even have words for in English, and that's why we call it a neshama. It's not purely intellectual. And music does the same thing. The fact that a human being is capable of compartmentalizing the beauty of music with the behavior that he displays when he's not listening, or even maybe while he's listening to that music, does not discount the importance and the power that music can have over a person.
I agree, it has a tremendous power, but the power is not to guide you in any correct direction. The power is to give you enjoyment and pleasure. It doesn't guide you.
No, it's not. Music is not just for pleasure. There are times when I listen to music specifically because I'm depressed, and I don't listen to it to give me pleasure. I listen to it so that I can have a good cry. If music was purely to give me pleasure, then there would be no Barber's Adagio. There would be no Albinoni's Adagio. Those pieces of music are there to stir within a person profound sadness. And music, therefore, has multiple different effects upon a person.
Okay, I'm not expressing myself correctly
It is
then.
supposed to, the purpose of music is supposed to invoke within a person a connection with something that is deeply embedded, that only rarely emerges. That's what the music is supposed to do.
So it invokes feelings. My point is just that it doesn't guide you on a proper path or be morally instructive in any way.
But that's, listen, maybe you're a Kalta Litvak and that's your approach.
I'm a warm Litvak.
But in Hasidus, the power of the niggin is incredible.
But what about the
And it's
example
supposed
I
to be-
gave?
that-
How do you understand that?
The fact that someone could be impervious to the music and still behave like an animal does not discount the power that music has. You can block out the most profound vision if you want to. That doesn't discount its ability to impact the individual. Right? A person can listen to the most profound Torah lecture and then go ahead and eat a ham sandwich if they want to. That doesn't mean that the Torah lesson was not profound. It just means that that person decided not to apply it to himself. One second, Patricia.
I'd like to go on the intellectual side, whether it's good popular music. I mean, Bob Dylan just got the Nobel Prize.
So,
For literature.
and what is your point?
Whether it's good popular music, and I've been listening to Dylan since he was in New York, in Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
Or Leonard Cohen, or Hallelujah, or it's great classical music. There is an intellectual structure to that. You listen to Bach's Goldberg Variations.
A good Canadian.
Glenn Gould,
Glenn Gould.
not Bach.
Right.
Played by Glenn Gould.
Yes.
You can hear the structure of the introductory theme, and somehow or other, by the time you get to the end of it, after an hour, 20 minutes, whatever it is, your head is full of almost it's the geometry of it. And in terms of how that makes you feel morally, yeah, after that, I go out and feel like doing something good.
Right. See, the Nazis were able to create cognitive disassociation because they viewed Jews as bugs, as insects that could be squashed. That's how they were able to reconcile it, not because the music didn't affect them. They loved animals. They had tremendous compassion towards animals. Yes?
When my mother-in-law arrived at the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau, there was a whole orchestra of Jewish people
playing classical music.
Yeah.
What was that?
The Nazis
To
forced them to do
Yeah,
that.
no, they
Yes,
forced
they
them to.
forced them to do that, but what message were they trying?
No, that was a propaganda message. That was a message of propaganda.
How were they trying to make the Jewish people feel
They
when
were
they
trying-
arrived?
they
in
were
the
trying to
States?
lull
And listening
them
to all this
into submission.
Beautiful classic music that
Nothing is happening here. That wasn't.
what, that nothing
Anyway.
is, that it's all beauty, but yet, but some of the pieces, the classical pieces that they were playing were very like, you know, to
Anyway, so let me just bring it back to, yes, go ahead, please.
I just want to recommend exactly this week in the Shataraiko website. There's an article there, Benjamin Black. It's very,
Benjamin Black's article is about
about Mel Gibson. So it's exactly the disassociation.
Mel Gibson,
between,
right.
Like art
Right.
and
It is possible for a very inhumane person to produce beautiful art. Wagner is an example of that. But anyway, so my suggestion is, number one, that in this last sentence, Judaism has declined in importance just as Jews have declined, is number one, that music offers spiritual energy. The Torah offers the similar. As people have less interest in music and the esoteric, they have less interest in Torah and Judaism. Number two, it's a call to action to the Jewish leadership. Re-engage in the arts. Re-engage in music. Perhaps if the Jewish people had been led by the Levium, as they were when it came to music, Judaism would not be lowered in esteem, right, as it is today. Anyway, those are some of the ideas. The reason why I don't think we'll have time to go into this today, this is an article that I copied from a website called Srugim. Srugim is a website that is meant for, it's an Israeli website. It's meant for, it's also a TV show, but that's not what this is. It is a Rav Aviner, who's one of the Rosh Yeshiva in the religious Zionist movement, had a whole discussion on the topic of music. And the question that was asked to him was, first of all, it was what was the context of this was on Parshas Truma, about the construction of the Mishkan. And in that article, he talked about how the reason why the Mishkan was so magnificent in its construction was because the artisans, the artists who constructed the Mishkan were Bitzalel and Oholiav, who were holy people. And a holy artisan is capable of imbuing his work product with holiness. So that led to a discussion of music. So does that mean that the holier the person, the holier and higher quality the music is? And Rav Aviner gets into that discussion, quoting the Kuzari. And in the course of that discussion, he says, and this is like in the middle of he says, Hayom marbim la'asok b'ma shenikra musika yehudit. Today, people get involved with what they call Jewish music. And the question really is there such a thing as Jewish music? Va'anu edim lapricha gedola shela. We can certainly attest to its widespread, its popularity. Mama afyein musika yehudit. What exactly makes music Jewish? Is it hatext, hamangina? Is it the lyrics? Is it the melody? What exactly makes music Jewish music? Right? Zemer shuhudati, zamar shuhudati, is it because the singer is religious? Is that what makes it Jewish music?
Like the soul of the music, the spirit.
Right? Let's say, for example, Hashem Melech, da 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 da. Right? That's a great song, right? How many of you knew that it was a Mark Anthony song? Right? So is that Jewish music? Is that Jewish music? What is that? So is it because he took the lyrics and put them... Anyway. Mahu feichata liyehudit. What turns music into Jewish music? That's really his question. So he admits, he says, Eineni batuach shekayemet muzika yehudit. He says, it's not clear to me that there is such a thing as Jewish music. Because he says, Harei hanigunim shel hachasidim lemashal, hem manginot rusiot shel kozakim. He says the old Hasidic nigunim are Cossack melodies that they used to drink in the saloon. Ela shegedolei olam giyaru otam. He says the gedolim of yesteryear converted the music. In other words, converted not just in a mechanical way, but also they sort of transformed them into something Jewish. Hachazanut shel Merkaz Europa mivuseset al yitzirot shel Strauss. He says the cantorial performances of Western Europe are based on Strauss's compositions, who was a Gentile. Min chikoi shel musika germanit. It's a derivative of German music. Umanginut Yehudei Tzfon Africa he musika shel barbarim shenilkecha mimitzrayim. He says the North African, Moroccan music is from the Berbers. That comes from Egypt. Lachein lo barur sheyesh lanu musika Yehudit. He says it's not clear to me that we actually possess Jewish music. Hamusika shel halaviyim hi mashu acher. Levite music was totally different. It wasn't Mordechai ben David. It wasn't, what is his name, Gal something, what is his name? The guy who sings Hashem Melech, I forgot his name. Gad Elbaz. Aval tzarech lomar ki yeshnam musikaim Yehudiyim. Eile musikaim tzadikim v'yirei shamayim v'hem misananim u'mimayanim et hamusika ha'olamit. He says there are Jewish musicians and performers and composers. He says what they do is they borrow from all different kinds of world music, and they transform that world music into Jewish music. Right? And it's got nothing to do with the Levite music of yesterday. But there's more. Maybe we'll pick up this conversation. One of the things that he discusses is, do we have any Masorah? How do we recover the Levite music that was played and sung in the temple thousands of years ago? There's no sheet music. How do we recover it?